My guest today is Charles Grimsdale. Charles is a serial entrepreneur, a technologist, an investor, and a music producer whose career has placed him at the front edge of major technology shifts, from parallel computing and virtual reality to digital music distribution long before streaming became mainstream. Charles has founded multiple companies across those waves, including OD2, one of the earliest legal digital music platforms in Europe that he co-founded along with Peter Gabriel. OD2 was a precursor to what streaming eventually became. And Charles later co-founded the venture capital firm Eden Ventures, where he has backed dozens of early stage technology companies in the UK and Europe. He now writes and records his own music and also helps musicians and bands build success in a way that reminded me of his work with early stage tech companies. I met Charles over 20 years ago when he was the CEO of OD2 and I was the executive chairman of Loudeye. That led to a merger between our companies, and I have stayed in touch with Charles over the years. I knew he would be a great Zero to Proof guest because of his humility, his humanity, his wry sense of humor, and his ability to see around corners and also take action. Again and again throughout his career and his life, he's identified important technological shifts early, often before the market even saw them. Then he had the conviction to build around those. In this conversation, we talk about that pattern recognition, the role of determination versus intelligence, and why some of the most important opportunities come from following curiosity before there is a clear path. We also get into what happens after traditional success, how Charles eventually realized that maximizing wealth was no longer his primary goal, and why he shifted his focus towards music, creativity, mentorship, and building things that felt personally meaningful. The premise of this and why I'm doing this and why I thought you'd be a good guest is that for many people, you don't have a playbook, if you will, for what happens after you've proven yourself enough to where you can shift to really being more focused on the things that matter most to you, as opposed to things to some degree that someone else will pay you for, if you want to simplify it. And and many people never get out of that. Okay, they spend their life, looking to do things that other people to some degree will pay them for, and that's an oversimplification. But the point here is really that I've had the good fortune to meet a number of people, you among them, who have really interesting stories, are good good people looking to make a difference, looking to create value, who are not transactional in terms of how they build relationships. And you've managed, in your case, to really chart your own path in some very interesting ways. And so with that, what I would like to do is rewind the life of Charles, and talk a bit about the journey you've been on, the people along the way, some of those moments when, some of it was serendipity, some would have been intentional, but, the story of Charles, and from the point of view of things that you believe are worth sharing, lessons that are generalizable and learnings you've had along the way. So long-winded, but
okay.
Yeah.
So should I start with just a very potted history?
The life of Charles, Sir Charles.
Okay. Well, I graduated from the University of Bristol with a degree in botanical science. Would you believe? My father was a farmer, yes. But I discovered computers at the university. I realized that I really didn't have any interest in botany. And that I was never going to make a career as a botanist, or at least not a commercially successful one. I mean, there was definitely, I was quite at that point driven by, wanting to make a certain amount of money. So, but I became fascinated by computers. I became fascinated in particular, this was the early 80s, in parallel computing.
Interesting.
And I started writing software. I was hired as a software engineer, and within 2-3 years, I joined another startup writing an operating system for a very strange microprocessor, which was invented actually in Bristol. I might have been at university in Bristol. The company was called Inmos. So this was actually a pretty pivotal moment for me. Inmos invented a microprocessor with communication channels embedded so that you could glue these things together to build massively parallel computers. So that was one pivotal moment for me. But then quite quickly, so I spent, I think, 2 years maybe writing, being involved. I was in a team writing an operating system for this thing. But all along, I knew I just wanted to be my own boss. I didn't really much like working for other people, I have to confess. So age 29, I founded a company called Division with 3 colleagues actually from Inmos. And we set out to change the world. So we ended up building essentially 3D graphics engines.
And you did it in Bristol. I mean, I think for I was surprised to learn, as much as I did about Bristol. Again, as an American, you tend to think,
nobody's ever heard of Bristol. No Americans have ever heard of it.
Bristol, it's a huge center for the BBC and for.
There's also where Concorde was invented. Well, not quite, but it was one of the key centers of engineering for Concorde. It was a big aerospace.
And at some point, you're going to talk about where music entered into your life, because I'm sure that wasn't an accident either.
No, okay. So I started playing piano. When I was probably 7 or 8, I discovered the drums in my early teens. I think I started playing when I was age 13. And age 17, 18, 19, even at university, all I really wanted to be was a rock and roll drummer. But I guess I realized that I was A, not good enough, and B, it's the probability of success in that industry was minimal. I guess if I'd been, I don't know. Anyway, I chose to.
So these themes come together later in your life.
Absolutely, they do. Yeah. Absolutely, they do. So thank you for me. Yes, thank you for letting me explain that. So I've played drums on and off all my life. So the Division story is then, by some weird twist of fate, we heard about this new technology called virtual reality. There was a small startup in Redwood City, a guy called Jaron Lanier, an amazing character.
Of course,
invented pretty much, anyway, a head-mounted display, a stereo head-mounted display. And I flew out to Redwood City, went to meet them, and decided, this is amazing. This is fascinating. So I imported, I think, the first VPL head-mounted display into the UK, and we set about building essentially a dedicated VR machine, which was insane. But we were young, impressionable, and probably pretty stupid.
You were early, which is a theme in a lot of cases.
We were very early.
Yeah.
One of the one of the most influential people in my career was actually the founder of Inmos, a guy called Ian Barron, who was a sort of grandfather of semiconductor industry in the UK. The UK didn't really have a semiconductor industry, but the Labour government of the time, in the early 80s, realized that it needed to get into technology, and it invested a certain amount of money into Inmos, and they produced some of the fastest static RAMs in the world at the time. And then they went on to produce this microprocessor, and they kind of pioneered a lot of technology around parallel computing. So my first business division, we built VR systems, sort of for research basically, and we sold software around the world.
How did you,
Various
I mean,
companies.
how did you get financed in Bristol, with the essentially no track record? How did that work? Because that also plays later in your life. You learned about capital raising.
Yeah. So I lucked out. There was a little blip, a tech boom in the UK in the early 90s, 92, 93. And we actually floated the company. So we'd had basically no venture capital. We floated the company on the London Stock
Floated, for
Exchange.
those who floated.
So we did an
You took it
IPO.
public.
We
You
did
did,
an
yeah.
IPO.
You took it public, yeah. Yep.
And yeah, that's how most of the capital, well, all the capital for the company really came. But prior to that, I'd funded the company as a consulting business. So we were doing consulting business and then doing R&D in the background.
Yeah.
And Ian Barron, I think, helped a lot with that. I mean, he really helped us think big. So he was a very important person in my
That's
life.
super important. So both for the person, because he I don't know if sponsor is the right word, but helped you think big. Because I think it's not intuitive for everybody to understand how to think at large scale, and having someone help you think that way, is pretty foundational.
Yeah. I mean, that definitely helped a lot. Anyway, Division, it was an interesting journey because I had two founders who were basically hardware engineers, and I had a co-founder who was a software engineer. So two of us essentially wanted to write software. Two of them wanted to build hardware. Yep. We ended up partnering very bizarrely with Hewlett-Packard and the University of North Carolina. So we licensed some technology, an amazing, massively parallel, basically one of the first GPUs, an architecture called Pixel Flow. We licensed that technology, and we essentially partnered with Hewlett-Packard to try and build a silicon graphics beta, something to enable Hewlett-Packard to compete with silicon graphics, which again was another totally insane thing to do. But it was a lot of fun. We ended up
you also
spinning.
You were at an age where you didn't understand maybe how
I didn't
hard
understand
it was.
what wasn't possible. No, so
yeah,
for
exactly.
Me, it was just right. For me, it was always like, this is an amazing technology. I can see why, how this could be really influential, and how it could win. Because it's a technologically, it was a really smart idea, which it was. And there were some very, very smart people that we basically hired out of the University of North Carolina, Raleigh-Durham. We set up an office there. Anyway, we ended up selling that bit of the business to HP, and we kind of doubled down in software. And we built software essentially for visualizing very large mechanical assemblies.
So if I can pause you for a moment, because I'm looking for themes, is one of the things that you have been good at through your life is I'll call it seeing things that are possible and important. You talked about semiconductors in the UK, parallel computing. You'll get into streaming and digital music at some point, but there's a sense that you understood and saw patterns, and then had the I'll call it the courage. Okay, maybe it didn't feel that way when
insanity,
you were 29 years old.
Is probably
insanity is another word, but those two things are related. Those two
totally.
things are definitely related.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think I never found it difficult to see how technology could be applied. To me, it always just seemed obvious that this was going to happen. What I was never probably that good at was figuring out how long it was going to take. That's a whole different story. But I think it's fair to say I've been a pretty early adopter and an early proponent of kind of new technologies. Anyway, we ended up selling the Division division group, as it was called, to Parametric Technology. So was at that point the world's second largest CAD CAM software vendor in Waltham, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot actually dealing with them, selling with them. I learned a lot about kind of sales infrastructure and how to build sales forces, because they were masters at that. Really impressive.
So some people get that experience from working in a bigger company. You were able to get that experience by partnering, because you described a couple of scenarios. So the ability to partner with companies a lot bigger than you, that's an art. As well as,
No, it's a good but it was very significant for me. I think I learned a lot. I mean, that was through, we were selling software essentially to a lot of PTC's customers. Their biggest customer at the time was Airbus, and they were our biggest customer. But we were trying to sell software we were selling software to Boeing, Lockheed, McDonnell Douglas, Case, Caterpillar. A lot of these were PTC customers, and we'd kind of see them. We did some joint sales pitches and things, and that was a really, I learned a lot from that experience. Just watching how they playbook the sales process, how they institutionalize the sales process, sales training, demonstration process, a lot of other things. Anyway,
things are assembling. I'm going to pause again, because it's assembling this knowledge of enablers. So part of it is people, part of it is skills, part of it is, you listed a company. You all these things become building blocks, foundationally, for the next things. But you only get them because you were willing to lean in. I mean, how old were you when you were doing that joint selling?
I guess it was maybe 30, 33, 34.
Yeah. And made you younger than most of the people in the room, I would assume, compared to.
I was there selling to, very sort of senior product leads in General Motors and
Airbus and Boeing. So again, those are those are great foundational pieces, because again, the thing when I look at this, and the reason I'm kind of stopping at this is, a lot of these are, what are the assets, personal assets, that are important to accumulate, become enablers for a lot of the things that you can do later in life. That being in those rooms, in those situations, not only was a great learning, but I think it helps you not be intimidated.
It comes back to, aim high. I think what I learned in those rooms was be prepared. If you're a tech visionary, you've got to kind of position yourself as a tech visionary, whether you are or not. And, I got into those rooms because they wanted to know something about VR. What was the state of the art? Where was it going? What might they be able to do with it? So that's kind of what got me in those rooms, and it was fascinating. It was a great time.
Yeah.
So anyway,
so you sold that one.
I sold that one. I made some money. That was nice. I kind of decided, I'm going to take a few months out. So I was fortunate I didn't have an earn out. I walked away, and that's kind of what I wanted. I rather stupidly, maybe not, I don't know. I mean, the CAD CAM industry was interesting, but it wasn't massively motivating. I thought, well, I'd just like to try and do something else. And at that point, my interest in music kind of, I thought, well, MP3 was the most searched for term on the internet, Google and all the other search engines. There were other search engines at that time.
People do. It's like the history is littered. History is littered with almosts.
So I spent 6-8 months looking around for something else to do, and just thought, wow, wouldn't it be amazing if you could build a platform that allowed people to download music securely and legally? There's a crazy idea. So I tested it with a few people, and then two friends of mine one of whom I've been at university with, John Grinham. He was interested in maybe founding a company. So I managed to convince John and a guy called Dave Shepherd that we should start a company to do this. We started this company, On Demand Distribution. And one of the people I tested the idea with was Peter Gabriel, who I'd met.
Who happens to be a neighbor, right? Yeah, and you met him at Division.
Yeah, his father built flight simulators. And Peter was fascinated in what was this virtual reality thing. So that's how I met him. He came to actually check out what is virtual reality, what could he do with it. But anyway, so Peter and I put up some capital to start on-demand distribution. And we built a platform. We built a precursor to essentially what is Spotify, as you well know, Anthony. So we built Europe's first download platform and then streaming platform. And I spent 4 years negotiating with the 4 major record labels, as they then were, to try and convince them to take their head out of the sand and to legally, to license the music to enable us to compete with LimeWire, eDonkey, and Napster at the time.
Yeah. So pretty big change of path. Okay. You went from what I would call pretty hardcore foundation.
Clearly, yeah. Another act of insanity.
Well, but it's also, there's a few things. First of all, you went from something which was kind of foundational tech for businesses to a consumer facing, service trying to get to, millions and millions of people. Married your passion for music with with tech, because it was not a solved technical problem of how to actually do that. People don't recognize that synchronous delivery of media was not intuitive. So there was some interesting technical. It was not easy.
Well, and to control what was flowing around on it was obviously not easy either.
And
I think actually a theme in my career has been, I kind of get interested in new technologies and new technology trends. So in the case of OD2, it was actually Microsoft, bless them, that released this framework for encrypting media, essentially, with the Windows Media Player, as it was then called.
Yes.
So I realized...
You know that I built and ran that group.
I do, yeah. But it was that kind of tech that made me realize, okay, and this was, clearly we could use this platform. This was a cost-effective way to go and build a platform that would encrypt music, because the big concern of the labels was, how are you going to avoid our music being ripped off? That's all they cared about at the time.
And it was a non-trivial problem, but it's non-trivial problem to basically, because people were not shipping protected content, if you will, licensed IP around on the internet. And again, the idea that everything was open, and as you said, the way you got music was, whether you call it stealing or not, you were using other people's copyrighted material. And in the music business, that's life.
We should be clear. You were stealing it. I don't think there was really much doubt about that. There was, it's fairly indefensible. Although for most people, they maybe didn't think that or feel that way. But anyway, that's a whole different story.
I think a couple things. So for most people, it didn't feel like that. So there was there was a lot of back and forth, which you lived through and I lived through, of the labels, the music companies suing individual people, who were grabbing music. I mean, there was a lot, but a lot of the problem was, because
there wasn't a legal alternative.
There wasn't a good legal alternative. And, that is not a problem today. There it may be some on the margin, but stealing when you can stream everything you want, legally, it's not a problem. So a couple of things. One of them is you married these things. You did something where there were some hard technical problems. You also partnered with someone, who had had the connections and relationships in that industry to be very helpful. I mean, you picked Peter Gabriel, and I don't know exactly, I know he was a co-founder of some kind. I don't know exactly what the role
Well,
was.
he was an angel investor.
Yeah.
And so, but he invested at the point we founded the company. Effectively, he and I invested equally.
Yeah. So you were partners. He also gave you some, because one of the things though, he gave you trust and credibility in the music community, which you otherwise would have been.
And some great introductions. I mean, a lot of it through, a lot of it directly from Peter, but also his right-hand man, Mike Large, shout out to Mike, was great. So we managed to convince a guy called David Munns. We managed to convince a guy called David Munns
at EMI.
Polygram.
Oh, Polygram,
and then he ran at EMI as well, to join the board. So before he joined EMI, he was on the board, on our board for a while. And he was super helpful as well, because it just helped me understand the mentality of senior record execs, what the things that really concern them.
One of the biggest problems that you overcame was how do you build trust and credibility to a set of people who are very risk averse? And so a lot of you weren't the only one trying to solve the music streaming problem. A number of other people, especially because a lot of tech people would say, hey, it's obvious. Why don't you just give me all your music, Mr. Label, and I'll fix everything for you? And, it doesn't work that way. So the insight you had, or serendipity you had of building those people into your board and into kind of the DNA of the company, was, I think, pretty foundational, not to be seen as yet another one of the tech pirates.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess that's true. But I think, but for me, it's like selling technology to Universal Music was really no different from selling technology to General Motors. I mean, so selling VR to General Motors, or selling, secured download streaming infrastructure to Universal, a lot of it was about just giving them the confidence that, okay, we knew what we were doing technically, we could make this work. And actually, we weren't bullshitting. There was, we didn't overhype it, we didn't oversell it. A lot of people were doing that. And as a result, you quickly lose credibility, because we were very British about it, if I'm honest, I guess.
Well, it worked because, it's interesting that
it sort of worked,
It worked in this. It worked. Here's the way I would say it. If you look at the largest independent digital distribution music company in the world, is Swedish. Okay, it's Spotify. There, when you say you were British, there's a certain truth to that. Is you were and I think a lot of the executives of music companies also were British. But you came at it with a style that worked in that particular industry. So you were able to do that. I mean, it worked in the sense that you built it up, and we met that.
Yeah. So I should point out that we founded the company in 2000, and literally a year later, 18 months later, the whole .com bubble burst spectacularly. So raising capital, we'd raised a small amount of capital. Raising capital was really tough at that point, 2002, 2003. We then we partnered with Nokia, because it became clear that one of the obvious ways to consumers was through mobile phones. That was the dream device for delivering music. So we did a partnership with Nokia. I spent quite a lot of time in Espoo in Finland with senior Nokia executives, and this was prior to the iPhone launching. Nokia,
people currently, if you're younger, you don't remember that Nokia was the dominant phone in the world, sold 400 million phones a year, and one of the probably the highest market capitalization almost of any company in Europe. at it. Yeah. And, and then,
yeah, I mean, they've been
poof.
phenomenally successful. And I very distinctly remember sitting in a boardroom in Espoo, and one of the divisional heads saying, I asked him about the iPhone. The iPhone had just launched. And he said, well, yeah. I said, are you concerned about this at all? Oh, no. What on earth? What do Apple know about mobile phones? And we've tried We've tried this touch screen technology. It just, consumers don't want it. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work for consumers.
Oops.
Anyway, whole different story. But so, yeah.
So you did OD2, which is how we met.
That's how we met.
Yeah.
So we ultimately ended up, in effect, selling OD2. Well, we merged it with Loud Eye in the US, which is how we met, and then Loud Eye was sold to Nokia. And I then...
Not enough to save Nokia, I think.
Not enough to save them, no.
No. But you did some really interesting things there. You because when I met you, I was a terminal Loud Eye, and you were running OD2, and you had a choice to make of, because you were considering listing at the time. I think, and it was still a difficult moment. It was like 2004; things hadn't gotten that much better. But you ended up deciding that going at this together, a combination of a U.S. and a European, if you will, music platform would work. And then iTunes happened. but kind of.
I mean, iTunes launched in the UK, I think, the day after we merged with Loud Eye.
Yeah.
So to me, the writing was on the wall that we needed capital to compete. And a listing was one possibility. But I mean, I don't know whether we made the right choice, Anthony. I don't know. Possibly not. But
it wouldn't have
hindsight
mattered.
is a wonderful thing. I mean, the problem was this was 2004, and consumers were still not ready to pay for music. They started paying for downloads. I mean, and Apple did. Jobs did an absolutely phenomenal job of marketing the iPod, the first, and then obviously the iPhone. If we'd had the capital to stick it out another 3-5 years, then we could have been. It could have been a very different story, but it wasn't. Yeah. So, but anyway, I mean, I think it was a fairly successful exit for those that were involved, although not clearly what it could have been. Maybe that's the story of my life, really. But
well, here you are in your own studio in Bath, so it's life can't be that bad. So that sold to Nokia, and then you went on. I think
so. I had already I decided I didn't want to do another startup. I'd done 2 of them in a row over a 15-year period. And I figured out I just didn't really have the energy to do another one. And so I founded a venture capital fund, an early stage venture capital fund called Eden Ventures, with 2 ex-colleagues, 2 guys I'd met in my very first job. And we raised a number of funds, made about 65 investments over a 12-13-year period, all in early stage software tech.
So talk a little bit about, again, there's the interesting, it's something led you to, each one of these big life professional decisions you made, you saw something, in whether things worked out, really well or okay or not at all, you kept going. So what was it that drew you into venture capital in the UK?
As an aside, because I should make a shout out to people that influenced me. One of the non-execs on my first board was a guy called Roy Cottrell. He was an amazing guy, a really nice guy, super likable. The one thing he taught me was that determination is the most important thing in business. He said the world is awash with smart people, but to success in business, you've got to be very thick-skinned, utterly driven, and very, very determined, because more things are going to go wrong than go right. So you just got to keep going. Anyway, as a shout out to Roy.
No, but that right there.
It was a very important lesson for me.
that that is foundational. All right. If you look at the
Yeah,
difference between successful people and not, as you said, the world is not only awash with smart people, the world is awash with ideas, you
yeah,
know, but the grit and determination. I mean, I compare a lot of times, business to professional sports. The same thing is true. Anybody who's going to become a top professional athlete or a top musician, anything, if you're going to rise to the top, you need a combination of things. Foundationally is
yeah,
this,
yeah,
determination, thick skin. People say, how do you keep going and all those, and you're just like, because. Yeah.
yeah. You have to.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the more people you have, the more people you've employed,
Yes.
at least I found, okay, that sense of responsibility, right? All these people are depending on me for their salaries. I got to keep going. I got to find some
Yeah.
way to make this work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we raised the fund. I mean, it was very tough. This was in
Yeah.
2005.
Yeah.
But I just thought, well, let's try.
Yeah.
And we had a number of really good institutional investors. A Dutch pension fund called Alp Invest was one of our first investors.
Why did they pick you, do you think? What was it about you?
I have no idea. No idea. I mean, I think it's the same dogged determination that,
Yeah.
They could see, okay, this guy, and my co-founders, we'd all individually been successful founding,
Yeah.
running, selling tech businesses. And we said, look, and had been quite successful as angel investors as well. And we said, look, we think this is something we could do institutionally. I guess
And
that's
they said,
why.
yeah.
They said, yeah, okay, we'll give it a shot. In fact, they gave us a clog.
Oh, well,
Being
there
Dutch,
you are.
That was the bond of trust is we're giving you the clog.
Forget the money. We're giving you clogs. Well,
Just the one clog. Just the one clog. I'm not quite sure what the significance of only one clog. I never got the clog. I think one of my co-founders has the clog. But anyway, yeah. So I spent the next 12 odd years as a partner in a new VC fund.
But let me ask you a question. What have you found the difference between US and UK, early stage companies? Because I would assume most of the investments you did were UK companies.
Yes, all of them. A few in Europe, pretty much, but pretty much all.
So what are the differences?
What's the difference? Capital. Principal difference is just the volume, amount of capital. I mean, and that's what the US has really. I mean, I'm not saying the only thing, but one of the things that the US VC industry, has so got right is, they put a lot of money into companies comparatively to Europe. That just certainly in the early, in the late 90s and early 2000s, late 2000s, there just wasn't that much capital.
Do you find that one of the other things, in addition to the capital, is I have found that failure in the U.S. is almost expected. And so people and failure and, I've tried and I've failed. People go, good. Well, if you haven't failed enough, you haven't taken enough risk. My experience is that's not necessarily true of Brits and Europeans. Is they're much more concerned. Failure is more of a black mark than, than a badge of honor.
Certainly in the 90s and early 2000s, it was massively stigmatized. If you've had a company that failed, there's no way you're going to succeed. I think that's different now. I mean, but I think this is all different now. I mean, capital still doesn't, there still isn't as much capital being invested in venture in Europe as there is in the US for sure. But I suspect, I don't know, I'm out of it now. But
what was what are the things in that, in the venture capital phase that you kind of, what did you learn and where did you feel that you were able to make a contribution? Because, you there was a vision behind a lot of the things that you did. And, being a smart investor would not on its own be enough to motivate you.
I think the problem was I wasn't a smart investor. I
Wow.
was an entrepreneur, turned investor. I mean, I learned, I think, more about what it takes to be a smart investor, and I realized I wasn't one. I can explain why, but I think what
Go ahead.
I
Tell
empathized,
why.
with the founders, and probably, more than I should have done. Um, so, it was a very privileged role. I met some incredibly smart people, some great founders, Daniel Eck amongst them.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean, so that was very energizing, meeting new young founders, seeing the level of their enthusiasm, excitement, drive,
Yeah.
determination, all of that kind of really drove me on.
Yeah.
Um, but I think what I came to realize was that it's essentially a numbers game. If you're investing early, very early stage venture anyway, you've got to place a lot of bets, and you've got to be prepared to cull those bets very quickly. So,
Yeah.
we reckon at the end you're probably placing for every fund a minimum of 35 bets. So the problem is that the ones that need all your time and support are exactly the ones that you shouldn't be
Yeah.
giving your time and support, because they're probably not going to make it. The really
Yeah.
smart entrepreneurs, the ones that are building, unicorns up, they're very smart, they're very driven, and they figure things out for themselves, actually.
Yeah.
And so there's only so much, someone like me could teach them. I could
Yeah.
give them a few pointers. The really smart ones generally ignore me completely. Um, that's probably true. I likened it
Yeah.
to, and so I just think I didn't really fit that well.
Yeah.
I was better as an operator. Um, I likened it to trying to decorate the house through the letterbox. Imagine you're pointing at, so you'd go to a board meeting, they'd say, well, what do you think? So you'd say, well, this is what I think. And they just completely ignore you and do something else.
See,
And then
so at some point,
sometimes it
not
worked,
very.
but more often than not, it didn't.
Yeah.
I jest slightly, but yeah, I think I found it quite a lonely role as well. Most people don't talk about this, but being a venture capitalist is quite an individual role. You go and source deals, you promote them, you manage them. There's not a lot of team effort, certainly in small partnerships, because there just isn't time. So
Oh, interesting.
I realized I'd actually missed the being in the trenches together. That was
Yeah.
the most important thing for me about running a company, was kind of the camaraderie and the sense of shared responsibility, shared motivation, and that shit, it's us against the world. You don't get that as a VC.
No, well,
Everybody just looks at
it's
you as the money guy, give us some more money.
and yeah, it's well, the thing you just said there is one of the reasons why when I I talk about what people want to do later, after you've had some success, if you spent your life in business, you spent your life as part of teams, and
Yeah.
you're there is something energizing. All the things you said, there's so many um, there's so many aspects of being part of a team that bring you up to a higher level, that let you be around other people who are competing at a very high level, and so um, you want to you miss that, when you don't have it. You've had enough success along the way that gave you some optionality. How did you? I was like, all right, we sold, OD2 Loud Eye got sold to Nokia. You did VC for a while and said, not my thing, you know, um, but you weren't done. Okay, so what led you to where you are and what you're doing now as you sit in your studio where, I believe you had some pretty interesting
Yeah.
people lately. Yeah.
So, I mean, I've been passionate about music all my life. I got into recording bands I was playing in about 20 years ago as a hobby. I then bought a large barn and converted it into a studio, basically. I decided to leave Eden, the venture capital business, because I just wasn't enjoying it. And as I said, I think, honestly, I realized I just wasn't very good at it. And it wasn't motivating me.
Most importantly. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I built out the studio, started recording more bands. I got into composing my own music, which was, again, crazy. But so, yeah, I started writing music and then started producing, producing young bands.
So talk about that. I mean, it's a version of what you described with business, except, it's with artists.
It's very different. But
so the answer is, I'm sure it's very different in practice, but in concept, you're helping people who are trying to build something. And
it's not unlike the VC business in some ways, in that, it's the probability of success for a new artist is very slim. So, it's good to be able to help any way I can. And I get a lot out of it. I get a lot out of seeing, young artists, their passion, their motivation. That's very energizing. Although, I'm sure they just look at me as like I'm this old guy that, they do look at me because I am an old guy.
And if you weren't giving them something, they wouldn't show up. They wouldn't show up if you weren't doing something.
Yeah, well, hopefully. But I mean, a lot of it, to be fair, I do for myself. I do it because I love making music. And it's great to make music with other people. I think to sort of partly the theme of your of your podcast is like, so there was a point where I realized, in my early 50s that I could carry on striving to make more money and be more successful, but I didn't really know what that success looked like. And I realized that all the people I knew that had a lot more money than me didn't seem to be any happier than I was. And so I guess I sort of did quite a lot of inward thinking and analysis and tried to figure out, okay, well, how do I accept what I have? And music in part helped me to do that. It was my therapy. And it's like, it's a great leveler. And so it helped me make that transition, because it wasn't an easy transition. That sense of self-worth, just vanishes, well, either quickly or reasonably quickly. So, it's kind of, well, what's my sense of purpose? Do I have any value anymore? It's not an easy thing to work your way through. Slowly, I got there with, okay, I finally realized, well, the thing that makes me happy is making music, walking the dog, spending my time with my wife, spending time with friends, and that I've got to stop judging myself by other people's apparent success and just really figure out how to enjoy, what's left. There you go.
They're very well summarized. I think the that epiphany, that moment as you described it, was pretty pivotal, because you then recognize that more isn't going to make me happier. As you said, a lot of people who have become quite wealthy. It clearly isn't a direct path to happiness.
Right. It isn't a panacea, for sure.
Yeah, and but there are things that did matter, as you talked about. The in your case of making music, the connection, but I would say you shifted your professional focus. You didn't fall back to just walking your dog, and
No.
yeah, and I was talking to someone else, and who, interestingly enough, also weirdly enough, a former venture capitalist who was an operator most of his life, was a venture capitalist for a while,
Right.
and then and what he realized is he really enjoys helping founders, helping people try to build things. That there was an energy that he got, and you sort of described it. He gets to the point where he's not a source of capital for them, so they're only coming and talking to him
Right.
when because they're interested
Yeah, because
in his
they need
advice.
they need they need advice on how to scale, or how to
Yeah,
start, or yeah.
and just listening to you, that feels like it's there, in music. That there's that's why I said there are parallels, to being an entrepreneur and starting a company and being a musician, and and starting to make a band. It's the odds are probably worse, but but
They're
but to some degree it
non-existent.
doesn't
At my
matter.
age, they're zero, right? So
Well,
they're
for you
again, but
personally,
yeah.
but for not for them, but for the people
But
who
for
are
them,
starting,
true,
for them,
totally.
yeah, and you learn that most companies don't become billionaire unicorn successes, but they're doing something that adds value.
Yeah, you find a
Um,
niche, relatively, a niche market, and you find very, very loyal fans.
do you find parallels between things that make people a successful band and things that make them a successful company?
Yes, very definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at you look at most really successful artists, particularly solo artists.
Yeah,
I mean, take someone like Taylor Swift. You know, she is
yeah,
incredibly driven. It's clear. You've just got just listen to any interview. She's
yeah,
incredibly driven. Clearly worked really hard. Really knew what she wanted to do. Um, but there are there are countless examples. So they tend to be they tend to be smart. They tend to be very driven. Today they have to be
yeah.
good at self promotion. So they've got to be
Yes,
great innate
yeah.
salespeople.
Which is true for
Um,
entrepreneurs as well.
which is true for entrepreneurs. No, I think there are so many common themes with great entrepreneurs and successful artists. Um,
You're a different, it's not venture capital in this in that sense, but there is something,
I mean, it
you
still
know,
kind of is. It's just,
yeah,
I mean, in most cases, I'm not investing capital; I'm investing time. Um, but I'm a partner in a record label called Seven Songs in Bristol, and actually another publishing company in effect called Space in Time, which is a group of producers. It's a production company. So we provide essentially artistic input and production support for artists.
without
Uh,
behaving like the classic publishing companies.
correct. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's a production company. Sorry, not a publishing company. So
Oh, okay.
we
Yeah.
don't take rights, but we
You help.
provide. Yeah, we help artists create music essentially, both
That's, yeah, that's
recording,
so cool.
arrangement,
Yeah.
helping them find the right musicians, helping them find their sound,
Yeah.
and then hopefully eventually maybe also find another record label that might be interested in helping them. We provide them with obviously recording time and mixing and all that kind of stuff. So there you go. That's my life today.
But it sounds, interestingly from outside, it sounds like the things that you've learned along the way are super helpful to these artists and bands, and by you looking at the infrastructure that's missing and helping with that infrastructure in a less predatory way, because we both know how the music business writ large functions.
Yeah.
That and that has a long arc to it. I mean, you could do this as long as you want to keep doing. and that, that for me, that's one of the things that I think is super important is finding your what's next, for people, because you don't want to be done, and so you found a what's next that really ties together a bunch of things, both for you and for the people that you get to get to be in life with, which is pretty cool.
I think it's absolutely critically important for anyone who's considering, I don't want to call it retirement, but a change,
because you're not retired.
No, exactly. The change of career is at this age, I hesitate to say, but at our age, then you've got to be really clear on what you want to do. What are you going to spend your time doing? Otherwise, I think.
And how do you give back? I think
absolutely.
There's a purpose. There's a book that someone wrote lately called Mattering. And, it was the theme that one of the core human instincts is we want to matter. And
still have some relevance.
There's relevance in a selfish way, and there's mattering there's both. There's relevance, and the reason I loved the term mattering was, you matter to the people you're helping. And matter is an externally focused thing. Sometimes I know that people kind of want to stay relevant, and they're doing two reasons. One of them is because they themselves want to be engaged, and the other is because of how they would be judged. But to some degree, if I look at you, a lot of what you're doing is, you do want to not just be relevant. You want to matter. You want to help. You want to be engaged. You want to make a difference, and that's so important. It could be whether you're 50, it could be whether you're 60, it could be whether you're 70, but it's when you're going to make the change, you have that epiphany in your early 50s where it's like, making more money is not going to be my North Star.
Yeah.
But something has to be. And so,
not for everybody, to be fair, not for everybody. I mean, some people retire into, relaxation and just spending time.
Do you know the statistics? Do you know the statistics on men who retire without something?
I don't know the statistics.
It's terrible. It's terrible. The life expectancy is a lot of times single-digit years.
Wow.
There's a lot more research coming out because you have a lot of older people that are continuing. But if you don't find, almost at any age, if you're not doing something. And mattering can make, there's no right or wrong thing. It could be, 100 things. It could be, but you're doing something.
But it's that reason to get up in the morning, isn't it? It's like every morning for me, like I get up as early as I can, and I go and play the drums and the piano.
There you go. That's right down, which is behind you somewhere. You're in the studio. The drums are not there, or the drums are around the corner.
The drums are in another room, but
in the barn. Which I have to come visit. I will. Well, look, thank you so much for your time, Charles. Always a pleasure, and take care.
Well, thank you.